London, 1888. A city wrapped in fog, fear, and shadows. In the narrow alleys of Whitechapel, someone was hunting. Someone fast, someone silent, someone who left no trace except terror. The police were overwhelmed, the press was obsessed, and the killer? He seemed to be watching it all from the darkness, almost enjoying the chaos he created. The police quickly realized they weren't dealing with an ordinary killer. The newspapers gave him a name that would haunt history: Jack the Ripper. Between August and November 1888, 5 women were murdered with a brutality the city had never seen. Deep cuts, surgical precision, and something else. Whoever did this understood anatomy. That clue kicked off more than a century of theories. A doctor, a butcher, a royal cover-up, a foreigner, a madman. But the truth always came back to the same problem. There was almost no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no footprints, no weapon, nothing the police could actually use. And for more than 130 years, that's where the mystery stayed. But in 2014, something happened that changed everything. A breakthrough that should have been impossible. A scientist named Dr. Jari Luhalainen, a forensic expert, got access to a legendary piece of evidence, a shawl supposedly found next to one of the Ripper victims, Catherine Eddowes. The DNA on the shawl matched the descendant of a man who has been a suspect since the beginning, Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant and barber living in Whitechapel. His name pops up in police notes from the 1890s. He was mentally unstable, heard voices, and lived very close to the crime scenes. The DNA match, according to the study, was a perfect match to the maternal lineage of Kosminski. The study was almost rejected. Many scientists weren't celebrating. They were skeptical because the shawl was never officially logged as evidence. It might not even be from the crime scene. And most importantly, the DNA analysis included unclear terminology, like phenotypic probability, which confused even other geneticists. But here's where the story takes another turn. Because in 2019, the same scientists re-released their findings, this time in a peer-reviewed journal, and they doubled down. This is the most advanced Ripper DNA analysis ever performed. New forensic tech changes everything. Since 2020, forensic DNA technology has undergone a revolution, and with it, the Ripper mystery has been re-examined like never before. Number 1. Trace DNA sensitivity. Scientists can now detect DNA from just a few skin cells, so tiny you can't even see them. A mere brush of a hand, a faint touch on fabric, enough to leave a genetic fingerprint. Something that would have been impossible in 1888. Number 2. Expanded mitochondrial DNA databases. DNA from long-dead suspects can now be compared to living descendants across huge databases. That means traces left on century-old items, like the infamous shawl, could finally point to a real person. Number 3. AI-assisted genome reconstruction degraded DNA fragments. No problem. Artificial intelligence can rebuild broken DNA sequences, essentially completing a puzzle that's been missing pieces for over a century. Number 4. Contamination filtering. And the biggest breakthrough? Filtering out contamination. New software can now separate DNA that was added later, from handling, from the environment, from what might actually belong to the original crime scene. When scientists applied all of this to the shawl linked to Aaron Kosminski, the results were shocking. The DNA still pointed to the same man even after 130 years. Modern technology couldn't ignore him. So, does this finally reveal the true identity of Jack the Ripper? The DNA evidence points to Aaron Kosminski, a barber living in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. The profile fits, the timing lines up, and modern technology seems to confirm what police suspected over a century ago. But there are big problems. The shawl used in the DNA test wasn't officially logged as evidence. It's been handled by countless people over 130 years, making contamination a real possibility. Kosminski never confessed, and no one directly saw him commit the crimes. And the murders stopping after his institutionalization could just be a coincidence. The shawl used in the DNA test wasn't officially logged as evidence. Over the past 130 years, it's passed through countless hands. Every person, every inspection, every curious historian. All potential sources of contamination. Kosminski was a Polish barber who lived in Whitechapel. He was poor, unstable, and later institutionalized. He was on police radars at the time, considered a prime suspect. But here's the problem. Kosminski never confessed. No one ever saw him commit the crimes. And the murders stopping after his institutionalization? That could just be coincidence. Let's rewind. London's East End was terrorized by a killer. Women were murdered in gruesome ways, with surgical precision that stunned doctors and baffled the police for decades. The case remained cold. Suspects came and went. Theories were proposed, and the city slowly forgot, until modern science entered the scene. Using the shawl, scientists claimed they found genetic material from the killer. They compared it with living descendants of Kosminski's family, and yes, the markers matched. Suddenly, over 100 years of mystery seemed solved. Or so it appeared, but skepticism remained. Dr. Jari Luhalainen, a leading forensic scientist, warns, DNA evidence from such an old and handled artifact can be misleading. Contamination is almost impossible to rule out. And let's not forget, Kosminski was institutionalized in 1891. The murder stopped. Was this because the killer was finally locked away, or was it simply chance? The case raises questions about the reliability of evidence, the danger of jumping to conclusions, and the enduring mystery of history. Some researchers say we may never know the truth over a century of lost evidence. Mismanaged crime scenes and folklore have blurred the lines between fact and myth. Even today, the case sparks fascination. Books, TV shows, documentaries, all trying to answer the same question. Who was Jack the Ripper? DNA is powerful. It can reveal secrets, clear the innocent, and point to the guilty, but it is not infallible, especially when it comes from a shawl that's survived 130 years of handling. Kosminski was noted in police files as a suspect, but was he the killer or just a convenient name attached to fear? The evidence points to a man. The DNA seems to confirm it, but doubts linger. No confession, no eyewitnesses, and an entire century of uncertainty. Was Aaron Kosminski really Jack the Ripper? Or did history get it wrong? Modern science offers clues, but the final answer may forever be lost in the fog. Let's zoom in. The story begins with a silk shawl, allegedly found near the body of Catherine Eddowes, one of the Ripper's victims. According to Russell Edwards, a historian and amateur sleuth, this shawl contained biological stains, blood, and what he and his team interpreted as seminal fluid. IFL Science +2, The Vintage News +2. In lab tests, molecular biologist Dr. Jari Luhalainen claimed to extract mitochondrial DNA from the stains. One lineage matched a living female line descendant of Eddowes. But there was more. Among the stains on the shawl, beyond the victim's blood, scientists detected what appeared to be semen traces, a tiny, almost imperceptible mark, yet one that could carry a killer's genetic fingerprint across more than a century. In a sterile lab, Dr. Jari Luhalainen and his team carefully extracted the DNA from the sample. Using mitochondrial DNA analysis, the same technique that links mothers to daughters across generations, they traced it to a living maternal line descendant of a suspect already whispered about in the original police files. The results were startling. According to the researchers, the mitochondrial DNA from this tiny trace matched the suspect's female line descendant, suggesting a direct biological connection to the crime. In other words, if the evidence is valid, It points to one man, a man who had been hiding in the shadows of Whitechapel, long before forensic science could even imagine tracing him. But even here, doubt lingers. This was DNA extracted from a shawl over 130 years old, handled by dozens of people, police officers, collectors, and family members alike. Could contamination have occurred? Could the trace have been planted accidentally through time, rather than left by the killer himself? Science had found a clue, possibly the final one, yet the question remains. Was this truly the Ripper's signature, or another ghost in a century-old story of terror? More than 100 years ago, the London Metropolitan Police were chasing shadows. Officers kept meticulous records, memos, and notes. Among these documents was a chilling reference, a handwritten police memo from 1894, naming one man as the primary suspect, Aaron Kosminski, a man who lived and worked right in the heart of Whitechapel, whose mental state and violent tendencies had already drawn police attention. Chief Constable Melville McNagden described Kosminski as a man prone to homicidal impulses and averse to women. He was not a foreign aristocrat, not a brilliant surgeon, not a mysterious artist. He was a local immigrant, struggling to survive in one of the world's most desperate neighborhoods. And then there was Chief Inspector Donald Swanson, the officer who supervised the Ripper investigation on the ground every day. After retirement, Swanson added a note in the margin of a memoir. He believed Kosminski was the killer, the man who terrorized London and then disappeared into an asylum, never to be heard from again. These historical records are haunting. They suggest the police were not chasing a phantom, but a real man they already suspected. Kosminski's name was not new. It was whispered quietly behind closed doors. The authorities knew long before modern science even existed who might be responsible. Yet for the public, the story remained a mystery. Jack the Ripper became a legend, a creature of fog, fear, and imagination. And then, over a century later, science entered the scene. Tiny stains on a shawl, believed to belong to one of the victims, were analyzed for mitochondrial DNA. A maternal line descendant matched the suspect, Kosminski. Could this be the proof the police never had? Or was it a century-old artifact, touched by too many hands, producing results we cannot fully trust? The intersection of history and science raises a haunting question. If Kosminski truly was the Ripper, why was he allowed to remain free for so long? If not, then what have we just uncovered? A shadow, a ghost, or a coincidence stretched across generations? Very clue brings us closer. And yet, the Ripper's story resists certainty. Evidence, witness reports, DNA, police files. Each fragment illuminates and obscures at the same time. One man, Aaron Kosminski, appears at the center. The timeline fits. The institutionalization fits. But the gaps remain. No confession. No eyewitness testimony. Just shadows in a city that has never forgotten the terror of 1888. So, was Aaron Kosminski truly Jack the Ripper? Or has history played one last cruel trick on us? The answer may forever remain lost in the fog, where science meets legend. And the line between fact and myth blurs, even today, scientific and historical debate. But despite the new claims, the case remains deeply contested. Skeptics point out that mitochondrial DNA is not unique to an individual. Many people may share the same maternal line DNA. Critics also question the chain of custody of the shawl. There's no fully verified documentation proving it was at the exact crime scene. Even more, some scholars highlight discrepancies in the historical record. The Kosminski named in old police files might not perfectly match Aaron Kosminski's personal timeline. And while many of Eddowes' descendants back the inquest push, the scientific community has yet to reach a consensus. The DNA findings, though powerful, have not been universally accepted or independently replicated, Aaron Kosminski remains one of the most compelling suspects in the Ripper saga, and with recent DNA revelations and geoprofiling research, his case is stronger than ever. But the controversies are real, and the questions linger. Was he the monstrous figure behind Jack the Ripper? Or is this just another chapter in a mystery that resists a clean solution? Overlay graphics. mtDNA inheritance chart, showing mother-to-daughter line. And then there's the chain of custody. The shawl, the very artifact that could hold the killer's signature, has traveled through countless hands over more than a century. Police, families, collectors, even researchers have touched it. There's no fully verified documentation proving it was present at the exact crime scene. Was the DNA truly from the killer, or simply from someone else who handled the cloth over time? Historical records add another layer of complexity. The man named in police files as Kosminski may not perfectly align with Aaron Kosminski's personal timeline. Scholars continue to debate whether we can definitively link the man in those records to the person identified through DNA. Even the timeline of his asylum commitment and his whereabouts is not completely unambiguous. And while many descendants of Catherine Eddowes have backed the push for a formal inquest, the scientific community has yet to reach a consensus. The DNA findings, though powerful and headline-grabbing, have not been universally accepted or independently replicated. One lab's claim is not the final word. Aaron Kosminski remains one of the most compelling suspects in the Ripper saga. Recent revelations, both in DNA and in geoprofiling research, make his story stronger than ever. Yet the controversies are real, the gaps are glaring, and the questions linger. Was he truly the monstrous figure behind Jack the Ripper, preying on the streets of Whitechapel? Or is this just another chapter in a mystery that resists a clean solution, a puzzle that may forever be hidden in the fog of history? But as bold as the DNA claims sound, they have ignited fierce debate, and not just among amateur sleuths. Experts across history, forensics, and science caution that the case may be far from closed first. There's the issue of mitochondrial DNA. Unlike nuclear DNA, mtDNA is passed down the maternal line. That means many people can and do share the same mitochondrial profile. According to skeptics, a match here doesn't uniquely identify one man. In fact, critics stress that an mtDNA match is far more useful for excluding suspects than definitively naming them. One of the most vocal critics comes from The Skeptic magazine, which argues that mitochondrial DNA, the type used in the shawl analysis, simply cannot uniquely identify an individual. As they note, many unrelated people may share the same maternal line DNA. This makes 100% match headlines feel misleading because mtDNA is more about exclusion than confirmation. Then there's the troubling matter of data transparency. In 2024, the Journal of Forensic Sciences issued a formal expression of concern. Editors revealed that when they requested the original raw data from the researchers, they received only limited response. The authors cited instrument failure and other technical issues. Without that raw data, independent experts say the conclusions can't be fully verified. Perhaps most fundamentally, the provenance of the shawl itself is under serious dispute. According to historians, there's scant evidence that a shawl matching its description was ever recorded in official police inventories at the crime scene. Jack the Ripper, Dr. Drew Gray, a crime historian, argues the shawl may never have belonged to Catherine Eddowes, or even been at Mitre Square that night. Adding to the confusion, textile experts have raised questions about the shawl's age. Some studies suggest it could date from the early 1900s, raising the possibility that it was not even around at the time of the murders. Without solid chain of custody documentation, critics say there's no guarantee the biological material being tested actually came from the night of the murder. Beyond the lab, historians like Hallie Rubenhold have questioned the entire narrative. She has pointed out that there's no reliable documentation linking the shawl to Eddowes, and she's argued that the focus on Kosminski may distract from the real victims, the women whose lives were lost, not just the identity of their killer. On the other hand, some new criminological research supports a stronger link. Criminologist David Wilson recently applied geoprofiling and archival data to argue that Kosminski's place of residence during 1888 was geographically central to the murder locations. Wilson also revisited mental health and behavioral records. He argues that Kosminski's documented paranoia, violent tendencies, and issues with women match the profile of someone capable of the Ripper crimes. But even Wilson's work, which gives weight to the DNA claim, cannot erase the broader scientific unease. Without independent replication of the DNA testing, and in the absence of universally accepted raw data, many experts remain cautious. Smithsonian Magazine highlighted that some critical data in the published forensic paper was presented only in graph form, not as the full genetic sequences, making it hard for other scientists to assess. Meanwhile, the descendants of Catherine Eddowes, including her great-granddaughter Karen Miller, have called for a legal inquest. They argue the DNA findings, while disputed, still warrant formal recognition of Kosminski as the man behind the legend of Jack the Ripper, seeking not a criminal trial, but closure and acknowledgement. Yet, as the debate rages, many scientists emphasize a simple but crucial point. Correlation is not causation. The presence of DNA, if genuinely from Eddowes and Kosminski, does not necessarily mean a murder. It could reflect contamination, historical handling, or a later transfer, rather than a fatal interaction. It's crucial to examine the finer details of this forensic breakthrough and the problems that lie beneath the headlines. The DNA tests, heralded as a century-defining revelation, relied on microscopic traces from a shawl that has survived over 130 years of handling every person who touched it. Police officers, family members, collectors, even researchers, left behind potential traces. Could the genetic material truly be from the killer, or is it a ghost of history, passed along through decades of contact? Then there's the question of mitochondrial DNA itself. Unlike nuclear DNA, which is unique to an individual, mtDNA is inherited through the maternal line. This means that many unrelated people may carry the same genetic signature. A match may point in a direction. It may narrow the field, but it is far from a definitive fingerprint. Science can suggest a suspect, but it cannot always confirm one beyond all doubt. In the end, this may not be a case of a mystery solved, but a mystery reopened. The forensic tools of the 21st century have shown a light back into the darkness, but they have not dispelled all shadows. Is Aaron Kosminski truly the man behind the Ripper myth? Or are we seeing the limits of DNA when applied to a century-old crime, tangled in legend, memory, and fractured evidence?